cute. I hope I can live down to that. I wanted to point out our banner, and we've actually changed the name. It's touching up our roots, Georgia's LGBTQ Story Project. We want to kind of stay away from history and herstory and that kind of thing. So anyway, but there it is. And I wanted to also mention we appreciate this very much, our community and our people and everything. And in return for doing this, I'm also donating some of the interviews that we've done. We've done this with Winston Johnson, who knew Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, and he got actively engaged in LGBTQ advocacy, which she did until she passed. And then also Erin Swenson. Are people familiar with her? Reverend Erin Swenson? Anybody? She is a Presbyterian minister. And she's the first mainstream minister to transition and keep her ministry. And she's still very, very active here in Atlanta and in Georgia. So we're also donating the documentary we did with her to you all, in addition to Winston. And then Dr. Jesse Peel, he co-founded all the AIDS organizations in Atlanta and Georgia. And so this will be kind of, I don't know how you guys work in terms of a library or streaming or something, but anyway, they're CDs and DVDs. So, let's see. In your, some people got cartoons in the chair. I have extra copies as well. And also what I wanted to do before I really get into the program is acknowledge a couple of people. My friend Stead Mays is here. You raise your hand. And Stead is a little infamous because he is famous for adding people, historic figures. And he is the one who added Susan B. Anthony, obviously posthumously. But, pardon me? But he confirmed that...
urging justice at historical sites.
Good.
Exclude people.
Good.
That'll work.
Good. You go, girl. And then also Nedra Deadweiler. Can you raise your hand? And she does civil bikes, right? And Save Your Spaces. Do you want to say a little something? No, I want you to say something.
Save Your Spaces is a Skillshare, and Edith has been a part of it. We did it a long time as well. And Dave and Bria have come both years to be advocates to present. Thank you to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to, any other people that are like activist type, of course, everyone knows Lorraine. Lorraine is well known for all her advocacy, and yeah. So I really stand in your shadow, Lorraine, because as Jen was saying, I've never been arrested. So, and that's kind of like, wow. So you arrested for all of us, maybe. What I wanted to do was kind of give an overview, and I wanted to be careful not to do sort of a laundry list, because we all kind of know what's going on right now. And I will reference that, in terms of what's happening. And Jan said, well, Dave, you've already spoken to us about history, so that's fine, and herstory. And I wanted to kind of talk about what is happening now in relation to what has happened, especially the strategies that we've been able to employ over the years. And it's interesting to me as I see what's happening. I don't think that the right wing and the new right and whatever you want to call it, they're not very creative. And they keep on coming up with the same old tropes all the time, right? So it's been interesting to me to see what they talk about in terms of grooming. That's the new buzzword, grooming. it reminds me so much of what was going on with Anita Bryant, and Save Our Children in Florida. And that's over 40 years ago. And they were saying, oh, well, they can't reproduce, so they have to recruit. It's like, we have never had to recruit. Okay. Telling you that. Never any dearth of people willing to, anyway. But it's interesting to me that, and I think that is a huge advantage in terms of, like, there's nothing new under the sun. And they're going to keep on doing the same kind of thing. And so if they're talking about recruiting, now they're talking about grooming and Save Our Children, same old. Anyway, when I came up with this idea, it definitely is hyperbole when we talk about, LGBTQ rights, bring the Bible Belt out of bondage, which I kind of like, all the alliteration, But Atlanta has always really been an anomaly. It's funny that I'm sure a lot of us have seen Gone with the Wind, and I never forgot the moment when they're telling Scarlett that, she can go to Atlanta, and she's like, Atlanta. It's like Mecca. It's like, wow, Atlanta. So Atlanta has always been, different than the rest of the South. A lot of people have told me, I'm originally actually from New Hampshire and have been here for a long time, but people that have grown up, in the South. I remember Burl Boykin especially, who passed away several years ago and kind of started everything here. And he was originally from Miami, and he said, this is the only place I could be. This is the only place in the South that I could be. And that's how a lot of people, feel that this was a place that they could come to and always be accepting. And I think it's interesting. I kind of am interested, spiritually in terms of ley lines and grids and things like that. Is there something, maybe mystical, something special happening here that doesn't happen other places? Because Atlanta's always been, of course, that's a slogan, right? The city too busy to hate. And in some ways, they do live up to it. In some ways, they do. Anyway, let's see. Okay. So that kind of covers the Deep South aspect of it. When we talk about bringing the Bible Belt out of bondage, I was also thinking of, the old tropes in terms of Gone with the Wind and Southern Belles and Cavaliers and that kind of thing, and how that so much of that is, totally archaic now. But we have always been, I say we in terms of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people, always been an anomaly ourselves and different and not gender conforming. And now the whole thing about being non-binary and that kind of thing. And I was really inspired by Judy O'Kelly, who used to be the executive director of Lambda Legal. And we were talking about, as you probably know, within the LGBTQ community, there's lots of dissent and that kind of thing. And so some people were saying, well, why should we attach transgender to our little circus wagon? Why do we have that in there too? And Judy was really inspirational to me because she said that she thought, as a heterosexual woman, she said that she thought that the discrimination comes from anyone who is not, cisgender, not stereotypical, not ordinary. And she said that she thought that prejudice sort of applied to anyone who was lesbian, gay, bisexual, and that therefore then when we include transgender people, that it's all part of the same thing. She was saying it's also some of the same kind of prejudice and discrimination. And I definitely tend to agree with that. So let's see, what else do we have? In terms of our story here, I have been here about 50 years, and I do remember very well the Atlanta Journal-Constitution when they were running articles and saying about the police driving the perverts out of Piedmont. At least they can't get away with that anymore. Stead and I were talking the other day about how some of the people at the AJC have actually been really, positive. They did a big article 2 years ago on the 50th anniversary of Pride, which was 1971. And Tamar Halliman, I want to really give her props because she's on the staff there, and she was great, and she did a whole special edition, and we talked about some of the things that had happened over the years, and there was a man who was the first, I call him the first openly gay anything. His name was Charlie St. John. And he was working at the HAC, and he was very, very active with the Georgia Gay Liberation Front. And he was putting Georgia Gay Liberation Front flyers in the staff mailboxes. And we said, Charlie, don't do that. please don't do that. Because we knew that for him to do that he probably was going to get fired, which he did. And one of the things in terms of strategies, we had I think you were part of it, Lorraine. I think, did you march on the AJC when I think that was back in 73, I think when we had that, yeah. And protesting that, his firing, and also the fact that they did not cover, the AJC did not cover our community. That's why we were really grateful to the underground newspaper. People probably remember the Great Speckled Bird, the underground newspaper, and also WRFG, Radio Free Georgia. And they were the only outlets that we had for a long time. And we had to create our own, obviously, our own LGBTQ media. But we're really grateful to the Great Speckled Bird and to WRFG. Let's see. So in terms of gender nonconforming, everybody knows RuPaul now, right? RuPaul, quite well known, who actually moved here, I think, when he was 15 years old, and was very active here for a long time. And then just the impact that he's had is really impressive to me. I actually, when Jen mentioned I'd written for Adult Publications, and I was writing for Out magazine in New York, and I was talking to the editor there one day when I was in New York and talking to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, RuPaul." He said, "Yeah, I remember him when he first got here, and he was eating out of garbage cans." He said he got a really good manager. He said that was the key to his, and now of course RuPaul, he kind of like he rules the world or something like that. But also the fact that he is, definitely gender nonconforming, non-binary, and has really opened up a lot of avenues, which continues to happen. Okay, so I mentioned Judy O'Kelly. And what I was gonna also talk about, I don't really want to, I could go into all the different things that are happening, but I think we all know that pretty well. I mean, I can cite different things. But in terms of the ingenuity that we can apply, I think that's a really important thing. So when we talk about drag queens, for example, it's very, very important to us in terms of the community and our story and our legacy and that, because the thing that I really admire about a lot of people who do drag is that, they're not hiding. A lot of times one of the problems is they say, well, you can pass or you can be invisible, or people don't necessarily know particularly. And, drag queens, they're just out there like RuPaul. They're just like right out there in your face. So now, of course, we know what's happening there, that, they're saying that, it's just, it's hard for me to talk about this because it's so absurd. It's like, okay, they're not recruiting, okay? They're just reading stories, they're just in libraries and they're reading stories to people and they're not trying to recruit anybody, and there's nothing obscene about it. It's just really, I think that what's going to happen, and what I do see happening to some extent, is that the hyperbole that people use sort of backlashes against them, because they say, now wait a minute, I saw, the drag queen story hour, and that's not what's going on. That is not what is happening. So that alone, sort of speaks for itself. And the thing that I also really admire about a lot of people I knew Diamond Lil real well. Remember Diamond Lil? People remember Diamond Lil? Yeah, I knew her very well. And she would tell me all these stories. Also, the thing that really touched me about Diamond Lil is that Diamond Lil was originally from Savannah. She was born in, she would hate me to say this, December 28th, 1935. It was a state secret. She didn't want anybody to know when she was born. And so she grew up in Savannah, and she was an effeminate gay man. So therefore, she could not pass. So she would talk, I would ask her to be on panels and things like that with us. And she said, well, I don't really have any politics. I don't really, know about the politics. And I said, just tell your story. And she said, well, I can't help but imitate her, but she said, you'd get arrested. You get arrested parking your car. You get arrested walking down the street. You get arrested standing in the bar. And that's not my experience. Luckily, like I said, I've never been arrested. But for her, I say her because she would use the female, although she identified as a male. That kind of harassment that she endured. And I think really that we can sort of drink, from that well, in terms of how people. When I interviewed her for one of the things I'm going to donate to the church is the interview we did with StoryCorps, and we did 3. And usually with StoryCorps, you only do 1, right? They only want you to show up one time. And with Diamond, it's like, so many stories, so we did 3. And I was asking her about her background, and she had been in the Army, I think. And then I said, well, you were dishonorably discharged. And she said, no, I was undesirably discharged. So that alone, that is like the quintessence, I think, of, the way that she would sort of deal with it. And one of the things that she told me and other performers was that when they would perform, there were laws, obviously, against, they don't seem to be that concerned with women dressing as men, but they were concerned with women dressing, with men dressing as women. And so in order to not be arrested, a lot of times they would wear briefs under their dresses or wear socks or something like that. And they could say, look, I've got some men's clothing on. So again, I think one of the things I want to call out is the ingenuity that people employed, in terms of saying that look, you really can't arrest me because, and these are the kind of things that, need to be happening now. I don't know what is happening with some of the drag queens that are performing, but perhaps they need to be doing the same kind of thing, saying that I do have some men's apparel on. And so you can't arrest me on that basis, which is unfortunate to me too, because what a demarcation that is. I really am confounded by what's going on, and I think wow, we've made progress, and then all this stuff is coming up, and a lot of times it seems to me that, especially in terms of trans persons, that we're kind of it, and then I think it's very cynical too. That I think a lot of times people don't really care about that, but it's just a way for them to get votes. It's totally like opportunistic, and okay, well, I believe in karma, so I would not want to have that karma. Let's see. The thing I want to also say is that in terms of what's going on right now, is that it reminds me a lot of A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And I was really gratified to see what President Biden just said. Silence is complicity. We reject hate in every form. And that was not happening under Ronald Reagan. We weren't hearing that. One of the things that was really harsh about that time, of course, was he was president when AIDS hit in 1980, 1981. And then it became, I just want to like really encourage us all to be as creative and resourceful as we can possibly be, because that was what we had to do during that time. With the AIDS crisis, we had to create our own organizations, and we had to take care of our own people. We had to love and care for our own people. And we luckily did have a Surgeon General, Everett Koop, who spoke out. And somehow he was able to keep speaking. And he was basically the only person in the administration for a while. I think from what I've heard, Reagan didn't mention AIDS until 1987. I mean, 7 years into the, whatever, again, karma. But also in terms of what's going on, it was really wonderful for me to see that LaFonza Butler is now in the Senate. First black lesbian woman in the Senate. And then, of course, Judge Ketanji Jackson. Boy, I would hate to be her. I would hate to have to go to work every day. It's like, oh my God. So I have to be with these people. Good Lord. But just the fact that we have that, because I mean, I remember also we had a Democratic victory party the night of 1980 when Carter was running against Reagan. And of course, Carter was, totally, we knew early on that was not happening. And then I had a partner at the time, Greg James, and he was just really, really disconsolate. And I said, listen, we knew that could probably happen, that, Carter might really get walloped and everything. And then all the lions in the Senate went down, like Birch Bayh and other people. And it was kind of like, okay, this is really... This is not good, not only the presidency, but also in the Senate. So when we were saying goodnight to one another, we were saying, see you in the camps. because and I'm sure a lot of us remember all too well. That was again, I think the sense of humor that we can cultivate is really important. And for us to say, okay, they're going to take us all and they didn't. We did not all end up in camps. Although I know that there was some serious discussion at the time when AIDS became an epidemic of having concentration camps. And that actually happened in Cuba, as I'm sure people know. So, I don't know. I'm so glad that didn't happen. And part of it is because we have a Constitution and Bill of Rights, so it's harder for those things to happen. But I also saw that in Montana, they just upheld the First Amendment in libraries. And Philadelphia calls itself a sanctuary city for people. So it's like always sunny in Philadelphia, right? And then I saw that Rod Stewart is now performing in Saudi Arabia, which is, again, any little thing. What's that? Yeah, I know. Him and Mick Jagger, right? You think, damn, Also, in terms of some of our story here, that it's important to note, I wanted to mention the Michael Hardwick case. People are not familiar with that. It came to the Supreme Court. Our esteemed Georgia Attorney General Michael Bowers versus Michael Hardwick. So, at the time, Georgia had a sodomy statute, like many other states did. And it's probably too complicated to go into, but through a sort of total comedy of errors, there was a police officer who had a vendetta against Michael Hardwick, who had arrested him for littering and decided to go to his house and present him with a subpoena or something like that. So Michael's roommate, worst roommate in the world, let him into the house. And so Michael's bedroom is down the hall. So the police officer comes into the house and he walks into Michael's bedroom. Michael's in bed with another man. And he arrests him on the spot for violating the sodomy statute. So does anybody know why that was the perfect case to challenge the sodomy statute?
Why that was a good
Huh?
case?
What
What was your question?
I was saying that the officer arrested Michael and his partner in Michael's bedroom, right, for violating the sodomy statute, and it turned out to be, it ended up that it went all the way to the Supreme Court to challenge the sodomy statute. And it was a perfect case because any other time anybody had been arrested for quote unquote sodomy was because they might be in a men's room or a park or something like that. This was in the guy's bedroom, So the thing that was devastating about it, and again, sort of, strength, hope, endurance, and courage, is that that happened, and he won in all the lower courts. And when it went to the Supreme Court in 1986, the Supreme Court upheld the sodomy statute. It's like, okay, we really thought we had this in the bag, and it was like, no. But as a result, and again, what I want to bring out is that we have, again, a lot of challenges, and what we did is that as a result, we organized the second March on Washington for gay and lesbian rights in 1987. It was the second one. The first one was in 1979. And we had massive civil disobedience on the steps of the Supreme Court. Were you part of that, Lorraine? Did you? You weren't? Okay. I know, I was hoping Maria Elena Dolan might be here today, and that's the only time she's been arrested, and she's been an activist forever, for just a long time. And so they had a die-in on the steps of the Supreme Court, to protest. And these are the kinds of things that we, are just going to have to keep on doing. Okay, let's see. See you in the camps. I got that one out. Does anybody want to have any kind of Q&A or questions or discussion? A couple minutes?
Let me add something about the original Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court basically said that the sodomy statute as applied to heterosexuals was unconstitutional, but it was not as applied to queer people, to gay people. And it was only until when the legal got a case in the Supreme Court which overturned, in Texas, overturned the sodomy statute, and that then became law for the country. That all sodomy statutes.
No, it's in 2003, Lawrence versus Texas. Yeah, Supreme Court. Right. And then finally, Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015 finally established marriage equality. But as we all know, when they did the overturned Roe v. Wade last year, Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas and Judge Samuel Alito said, well, maybe we need to, revisit some of these decisions. So, I know. We cannot rest. We cannot rest. I wanted to close with a poem, but if we want to have any more, and also what I wanted to tell people too, if we want to continue the conversation, I was thinking, some of us could go to Manuel's and sit and talk and that kind of thing. The point I really want to make, above all, is that when we're talking about everything, it's so easy when they talk about, sex, and of course, we're Americans, and it's like, no sex, please, we're British. but people get really antsy about that. I wish we were more like Europeans. And what I really wanted to bring out, most of all, is that when we're talking about love. We're talking about people loving people. And so I wrote a poem years ago to my former partner, and I just wanted to share that. We were doing a counseling session together. It was called co-counseling. And so I was helping him in a counseling session. And I pound the hill and slice the air. I feel my fear leaves me there. He starts to laugh with wild heaving. A piercing wince brings tears streaming. I cradle him past plaintive cries, his caring gushing from loving eyes. My soul craves to purge his pain, feeling consummate love again. I ease him back through summer sounds Applause and cheers traverse the grounds. We conjure what could ever be, nurturing love unconventionally. Thank you.